Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I am your host, Brian Scott. Today we are returning to Quo. I was very interested after recently reading The Power of Your Subconscious Mind again for the channel. What Quo had to say in particular about the subconscious mind. As I delved into it, it is very fascinating. If you look at the law of one material, the raw material, you have the potentiator of the mind, the matrix of the mind, their discussion of the tarot and the symbols of the tarot, discussing the subconscious as the high priestess is an interesting way of elaborating on how the subconscious interacts with the conscious mind. And I wanted to know if Quo went into this further. There were several channelings I found. We begin with a channeling delivered on May 17th, 1992. These channelings are from Quo, a principle which included a group of different higher density entities. We've read several of these channelings in the past, and in previous episodes we discussed more about who Quo is. As Quo says, just take what resonates with you and forget about the rest. They begin with a question. The question this afternoon has to do with coordination between the feminine portion of our minds, the subconscious, and the male portion of our minds, the conscious mind. How this interaction can produce a symbiotic relationship and create a wholeness of experience, a wholeness of being, so that we are inspired to move in the direction that is most appropriate by the subconscious and inspired to accomplish the work that is before us. How can we gain a clearer, more stable access to that subconscious feminine portion of our minds? How can we learn to appreciate this process? What exactly occurs in this process when the inspiration is given from the subconscious to the conscious? Where does it come from? How is the subconscious aligned with our overall pattern of learning and serving that allows this process to occur? How can we, as we appreciate our own subconscious mind and ability to transform ourselves, how can we become examples or teachers or facilitators to others who may come to us seeking this kind of assistance? Carla channeling begins by saying, I am Quo. Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. How blessed it is to be with you at this circle of seeking. We offer each of you blessing and thanks for calling us to respond to your query. You offer us employment in the service of the one infinite creator. This is our dearest desire and our chosen mode of learning. For as we teach, we learn. As we serve, we are given service by your beautiful hopes, ideals, and single-hearted desires. You cannot imagine how manifold are the blessings we receive, the learning we receive as we do what is called teaching. We share opinion, not truth, and would not do any the disservice of asking for the status of authority. Please discriminate among our opinions, choosing those thoughts which seem useful and discarding the remainder. This we would appreciate. As we look for an entry into the wide question asked this day, we find that we first would wish to examine the terms male and female as sexual terms. For these terms create a kind of stumbling block to grasping more thoroughly the actual goal of the seeking for the wisdom within. Each, as you sit in the circle, is biologically male or female. The self-consciousness concerning this at a minimum, yet there is within each some distortion concerning the relative excellence of the body, which carries sexuality, and the mind, emotions, and spirit, which are given masculine and feminine characteristics, seemingly somewhat separated from the consideration of biological sexuality. To lift the stigma of physicality from sexuality would be a well-conceived effort. The sexuality of the physical vehicle expresses very well, very beautifully, and sacramentally the dynamics which are seen in the mental, emotional, and spiritual journey. Yet because of the vulgar use of bodies by their owners and by those who would possess bodies, the body is seen as beautiful in its sexuality or innocent of sin, if you would use such a word. Yet this sexuality has much to study in its possibilities in this incarnational pattern. To many cultures, the eroticism of hidden genitalia and physical forms in general is considered a positive beauty, a pure truth, and were each biological male and female to value the body sacramentally, it would become clear that human physical sexuality is an information resource which like any other speaks of the love and the light of the one infinite creator. Therefore, as one turns to face the mystery of the deep mind, there is a close resource, that being the seeker's own sexuality. As each seeker moves along the highway of the Father's mystery, seeking love and truth, it is well to encourage the self to love and accept the self, beginning with the physical body, its sexuality, its every curve, dimple, and seeming marred place or imperfect place. Loving the self within the skin is far more readily attempted when one has loved and accepted the skin, the shell of physicality which carries about the consciousness which you truly are, and which manifests within this illusion your field of consciousness, desires, questions, and often cryptic answers. To this end, let us pause and let each feel the heavy, familiar physical vehicle. This is that which has given itself that you may think and feel and express your free will and your choices in this life experience. Feel the breathing, the limbs resting, the muscles as they are supported. You may perhaps feel as if you are driving a car all of a sudden. This is a feeling we would like for you to experience. You are not your body, but your body is a second density form. Every cell of this body vibrates with the love and the light of the Infinite One. Take this moment to thank this beautiful animal form for the sacrifice of its instinctually lived life. That life you have tipped upon the ear, and that life is not possible. This body of yours is living your life and dying your death. Very well. If we've been able to encourage feelings of acceptance and respect and love for the gallant body, then it is time to move on to the seeking of that within, which seems archetypically female. Within each culture, the male and female dance, a somewhat different courting dance, play somewhat differing roles. It is not well to generalize, and we hope to be accurate, but insofar as one can be general, the male feels that it has chosen a female. The female waits for the choosing. When one applies this to the seeking of the intuitive wisdom of the subconscious, one may focus upon the male portion which chooses to reach for the chosen one, the pearl among all other and less entities, the very most nearly perfect of all possible choices. It is with this lover's delight in the right choice that the conscious mind reaches for the lovely, gentle, and very powerful subconscious. The subconscious is coy, hidden, and not always immediately responsive. The first feminine characteristic, therefore, of the conscious mind's learning is patience. There is the reaching, but not the immediate grasping, not the rapid, obvious success, but the long, patient, tender courtship of these qualities within, which are lighter, freer, and more wise than conscious plodding thought. How difficult it is to be patient, how wary one is of the waiting. At this point, the second feminine quality is evoked by need. That is, the faith that patience is deserved and appropriate. Faith is a fruit of the wisdom within the spiritual self of the deep mind, yet it cannot be reached except by faith. Thusly, as the male portion of the self, and we are generalizing as the conscious mind reaches for the unconscious, intuitive heart's wisdom, it uses faith, that which it believes it does not yet have, yet the very reaching for this perfect bride of wisdom evokes that principle, and faith is found, and persistence is able to be sustained. In the journey of the seeker, there are times or periods when the spirit within seems to burst into bloom and flowers appear in the conscious mind, the blossoms that are daughters of the patience, the faith, and the waiting. The farmer cannot say how the seed germinates and grows, nor can the seeker say how inspiration has come, yet the farmer knows to collect seeds of the appropriate type when it is planting season, and so the intelligence of the conscious mind chooses its seeds in the fastidiousness of its courtly, loving, and patient approach to the fertile subconscious. Let us use a sexual image to further focus upon the fertile aspect of the spirit of truth. The desire of the conscious mind for truth, for information about how to love the Creator, how to know the Creator, how to serve the Creator, may be further and further purified as seeking proceeds. The questions do not change, But the process of seeking the answers can be more and more refined so that the lover of truth has ever more abilities to penetrate in a gentle yet fruitful way the recesses of the unconscious. The reaching becomes very single-pointed, very courtly, and very passionate, and the fruitful wisdom within is made into a living being of new concept. Something is born, something that as a unit may rise through dreams, through daydreams, or for those whose thresholds of consciousness are permeable, simply through the limen of the conscious mind. The desire truly impregnates intuition. There may perhaps be a figure which may explicate this feeling. The guide or teacher has been seen in your spiritual studies often as angelic, wise, without a body or without a light body, but certainly that which comes down from the higher planes to touch the hearts of seekers. See that consciousness within which is the spirit of truth, the unconscious, as that which is touched by fire, that which becomes the fire, so that as the seeker seeks within itself, it is aware that that which it seeks within is a miniature, holographic representation of that highest truth, which is the infinite creator, the intelligent infinity, which moving through ethers and ethers, dimensions and dimensions, stays true to its spirit as octaves stay true to their tone, so that the subconscious or unconscious is in a fruitfully thought of way the creator, the highest self, and this creator may create, and you as co-creator may co-create and invent and manifest, so that as you seek within, the unconscious organizes itself according to the gentle, loving courtliness it has received from the conscious mind, and becomes attuned towards wishing to give the outer or conscious portion of itself more information, so that the way in which you approach wisdom creates the precise kind of information you shall receive. You are creating your own information because you are the spirit you seek. Now, the other portion of this figure is that when information has been reached for lovingly and received with respect and molded to the self's person or spirit or character, it may then have a strength which is not simply your own, but which contains higher octaves of spiritual wisdom, so that as you are able to manifest the blossoms and fruits of the subconscious, these retain a quality of infinity and are able to refresh and renew not simply the self, but other selves as well, and this without tiring in any way the conscious self. The more the conscious mind becomes impatient for knowledge, the more knowledge will recede from the spiritual seeker. The instructions are to desire greatly the wisdom of the heart, yet one is not rewarded for translating great desire into eager and impatient great desire. In this kind of desiring, we ask each to consider the value of feeling the beauty and purity of this desire, appreciating it in and of itself, seeing its virtue, and knowing that no matter how long it may seem that the search goes on before results occur, this desire, this stance, this way of being is in itself a witness to a life lived in the heart. For is it not a value of the heart to wait patiently upon wisdom, knowing that it cannot come at an appointed time, but must always surprise the seeker? Dwell peacefully with the desire without taking away the intensity, so peacefully and intently await the impregnation of the heart by your desire. Seek and ye shall find. These words of your holy books are true. The time factor is not mentioned. A portion of your query looked into how to aid others concerning the seeking and learning of, and from the unconscious portion or deeper portion of the mind. In this regard, it is well to reflect upon the entities which have aided the self. Perhaps within there was the need for reassurance, but insofar as the teacher took responsibility for your learning, just so did the teacher vitiate the progress made by creating a false dependency. So when one gives counsel and is able to act as an effective catalyst for deep learning, the overwhelming response of the client or patient is gratitude and the giving of credit away from the self to the catalyst. The way in which this dynamic is handled by the teacher is potentially quite helpful and potentially quite disempowering. To empower the student, the client, the patient, one may do one of two things. Firstly, one may smile and say nothing. The lack of feedback will be a catalyst for the student to work through the realization that a blank wall cannot be given credit. The other, and perhaps more seemingly humane method of dealing with this situation is to explain the action of the self with the self when it strikes a catalyst. The catalyst remains unchanged. The work and the reward are both those of the regent, in this case the mind and portions thereof of the student. In either case, only so much can be affected by any means of communication. Entities which wish to be dependent will simply choose to be dependent. In those situations, it is well to know the self well and to protect the self as if from the biting insect. The repellent is thought, a simple thought that catalysts are only that. That responsibility cannot be taken, that much as one would like sometimes to have effects upon others. One's work is always with the self. Dwelling in this realization, giving thanks for it, and praising the Infinite One for the harmony and resonance of this aspect of the Creator's universe seats one in this fluid thought, marinates one in the precious well of self-knowledge. The limits are here and here. This is peacefully affirmed and known, and like balm upon the skin which insects will not choose to taste, so do the hungry dependencies of students find themselves unable to fasten upon you. In the world of metaphysics, thoughts are tools. We begin with the sexuality of the third density physical body, because the process of your spiritual evolution is sexual without the stigma attached to that word among your peoples. The wisdom of the heart is not touched but absorbed, and it does not move in a linear fashion to inform. It is born and its DNA encoded by the purity, patience, and lovingness of your desire. We realize we have barely scratched the surface of this interesting query, yet the instrument requests that we move on. We would leave some portion of this working for queries. However, this instrument is somewhat fatigued, and we would prefer to transfer the contact to the one known as Jim. Jim channeling says, I am Quo, and greet each again in love and light through this instrument. At this time, we would ask if there be any other queries. Jay says, I have a query. I'm curious as to the nature of restlessness and always constantly needing to do something, boredom in things, and this different work that I do it for a while and become bored and must move on to something else. And I do that for a while, and there never seems to be anything that I'm settled in for very long. Is there something that I can do to become more rested and settled? I am Quo, and I am aware of your query, my sister. As we look upon the characteristics of any seeker's life pattern, we see there are those which are understood in some degree and not understood in yet other ways. Each entity, as it journeys upon the path of seeking the truth, will find there is a pattern that develops that will inevitably create the web of information and service opportunities that was desired before the incarnation began. Thus, we are cautious in attempting to give information that would infringe upon this process, in that there would be the loss of opportunity if certain characteristics were altered. However, as we look upon the query which you have offered to us, we may comment by suggesting that within the personality structure that you have adopted for this incarnation, there is the need to gather a great deal of information in a variety of fields so that there is a resource available to you upon a very deep level of your own being that will allow you to create a mythology, shall we say, that is various, that is full, and that is of a balanced nature so that you are able to express feeling tones and emotions and desires in a way that is satisfying. We can suggest that if you feel that this quality that you have described as restiveness is playing a detrimental part in your overall process of growth, that you examine your desires to move from one endeavor to another very carefully within the meditative state, and that you picture that which is your current experience as fully as is possible and see this experience from a point of view that looks at relationships of self to others, self to concepts, self to the environment about you, and begin to see this experience as one portion or piece of a larger puzzle. Look at those areas that have been enriched by it, look at the possibilities that depend from it, and then look at the feeling that has grown within yourself that you describe as boredom, and follow that feeling as if it were a trail, exploring each turn and tangent that is touched as you explore it so that you come to a more complete understanding of its origin, its process, and its consequences. Thus, as you accomplish this meditative examination, you may inform yourself as to the step that you are taking and become aware of its significance upon a level which is more fully informed than would be possible if you merely moved upon the impulse with a more cursory kind of examination. Carla then asks, is there a principle here to look at? Is it probable that each time we think we have a fault or that something is inconvenient to us, if we follow it through, we see that it's one side of the coin, the other side of which is our greatest opportunity? I am Quo, and we are aware of your query, my sister. In general, this is correct. It is easy within your illusion to see feelings and experiences as separate from the overall journey that is being made, so that there is the possibility that one portion of value may be discarded as irrelevant when, in fact, it has a close connection to the primary program for the incarnation if more carefully examined. Thus, each portion of the experience presents the opportunity for discovery of the self and of the great self from which we all come and to which we all return. R asks, how does one find lessons for the self in frustrations encountered during the seeking? I am Quo, and I am aware of your query, my brother. The lessons that are before one, oftentimes as they are becoming apparent, are in large part hidden, so that what is necessary is the continued application of attention and effort by the seeker upon that which is the source of frustration. For there is within each frustration a trigger point or place of beginning, which is the key to unraveling more of the nature of the experience that is before you. If you can look, and again we suggest the meditative state for this looking, at the experience which provides the frustration, and look at that experience objectively, so that it is but experience, and see the frustration that comes to you as that which you have created and which is not inherently contained within the experience, then it is more likely that you will see the point at which frustration becomes the experience for you. This examination will provide you the means, once again, of following a trail. The trail begins at the point at which frustration is noted. Look at the series of events, the relationships, the entities involved at each of the portions of the experience before you. Look at them not only in their practical and mundane senses of everyday activities, but look at them also as symbols of higher principles that are at work within your incarnational pattern. The more carefully you have observed patterns of all kinds within your incarnation, the more easily you'll be able to connect the relationships of these patterns to the nature of the lesson that are yours to learn and the services that are yours to offer within your incarnation. The point of frustration is as a sticking point, shall we say, at which time there is more that is not understood than there is that which is understood. If you can explore what qualities within yourself have brought about the response of frustration in relationship to the experience before you, you will have informed yourself of the basic relationship as well. If you can, shall we say, cross-reference the various causes of this frustration, you may begin to see themes repeating in your pattern of experience. And as these themes repeat, you may discover there is a certain quality within your character or personality that you are developing, and that the feeling of frustration is a kind of friction that wears away those lesser qualities, those which are no longer useful to you, and which provide you a more polished surface so that you may see yourself more clearly. Thus, frustration can be an indicator that there is an opportunity to expand one's concept of self, of service, and of learning within any particular experience. Moving to a channeling delivered in November of 2008. The question from G: throughout the law of one material, Ra speaks often of the entity as a single indivisible unit. They speak of the entity evolving, the entity doing this thing or that, and the entity making this choice or that choice. Who is the entity that makes choices and is responsible within the incarnation? Is this the conscious self, the subconscious self, or the undivided whole entity? I ask because the activities Ra says that the entity enjoys seem often to occur well below the threshold of conscious awareness. How far into the spectrum of choice does the conscious self's responsibilities extend? What exactly is the proper role of the conscious waking self? Carla Channeling says, your query, my brother, moves deeply into the texture and the fabric of the law of one, and into the paradox of oneness. For if all is one, how then can there be individuals? How can there be separate and unique selves, and yet each of you is a unique self? There is no spark of the Creator like you in the infinities of worlds of the infinite creation. You are one of a kind, and you are as treasured and beloved as any one-of-a-kind gem or artifact. You are sons and daughters of love. It was from love that you sprang, an infinite number of holographic portions of the one infinite Creator. It is as unique shards or atoms of the one Creator that you have come through many densities, many worlds, and many experiences to find your way to that location in which you sit as you are listening to or reading these words. You have journeyed far. That spark of the Creator that you are as an entity has had incarnation upon incarnation, experience upon experience. Each time that you have finished an experience and moved back into the inner planes in order to heal your incarnation and to plan your next incarnation, you have chosen portions of the whole self that you are, which we sometimes call the soul stream. In one incarnation, you may seem to have a personality that is somewhat different from your personality in another incarnation. However, the essence that flows beneath and behind and beyond personality remains the same. It is easy to confuse this self as an entity or an essence with the contents of the personality. The personality feels so much like your entire self. Your personality, after all, has been forged in the fire of experience and bears the imprint of parents' love or lack of love, your parents' respect or lack of respect, your teachers and friends and the way they have impacted your life. Over years of choices, you have built up a self that you recognize when you look in the mirror. Not simply the face you see, but also the self that lies within your eyes. You can describe yourself. You are a person with a sense of humor, a person with a mission, a person with a job, a person with sexuality of a certain kind, and so forth. All of these details of personality and character, circumstance, and estate are valid and useful. In no way do they or can they define the entity that you are. You know that it is said in the Bible that you come from the earth, and to the earth you shall return, dust to dust and ashes to ashes. This is quite literally true of your physical being. Left in a state of nature, your body would literally return to the earth. In the same basic way, you are the Creator, light from light and love from love, and you shall, in the fullness of time and space, return to the light and the love that formed you. For this tiny iota of time and space, you have gathered your suitcase full of personality and have launched yourself into incarnation on planet Earth with your agenda, your gifts, your limitations, and your relationships. You have come to challenge yourself, to be tempered in the fire of catalyst, to bathe in the waters of unknowing, and to experience the self, its desires, its will, and its faculties of faith and desire. Who is the entity that has launched itself forth in you? It is easy enough to assume that what you see is what you get, that you are an entity with 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a heart, lungs, intelligence, and so forth. And that is, of course, your conscious waking self, that captain of the ship of your life. You carry on board the ship that is yourself a great deal of cargo, in holds far below the surface of the ocean on which you ride in your destiny-filled journey through your incarnation. You carry 1,000 or 1,000,000 or an unknown number of previous learnings and balancing, some of which may never rise to the level of conscious awareness, yet they lie within you as precious cargo. The more access which you are able to create in your life to this cargo, the better. The spiritual journey is not linear. Bits of the cargo that you carry can be teased into the daylight and studied by examining with the help of a medium or hypnotist a previous life. However, no matter how many previous incarnations you're able to uncover and study, you are still in the position of not being able to see what your situation truly is as regards your reason for coming into incarnation with just these personality choices out of all the many, many choices you could have made. There lies within you that essence or beingness which is very slow to evolve. Each incarnation that you have is as a semester in school, where there are certain courses you are taking, certain books of life that you are studying, certain tests that you have set for yourself so that your studying may have a point and may come to a culmination within your incarnation. And only the tip of the self is above the level of the daylight consciousness, as the one known as G has pointed out quite accurately. You may therefore see yourself as an explorer of the mazes and mysteries of the self. All that you may find out is useful, and yet you can never exhaust the question of who am I? Once you release the primary truth that you are the creator experiencing itself, you are possessed of the self-awareness that you are indeed an entity, yet you are not possessed of a complete intelligence concerning this entity that you know that you are. It is as if you were a name written upon an envelope in a letter you have written to yourself, which you have not read. And so you hold up the envelope and you say, I know I'm here. I have a letter with my name on it. But you cannot read that letter. You tuck that letter of self away for this incarnation that you're experiencing, and you set about discovering yourself as you make your choices and live your life. There are those within your density who have penetrated quite deeply into the portion of their essential selves that lie below the waterline of the waking consciousness. As the one known as G has said earlier in the conversation preceding this meditation, the contemplation that continues creates its own space with more and more definition. Each added minute and hour of contemplation brings one to a deeper state of awareness. Not a state of awareness that explodes with linear knowledge, certainly, but a deeper state that begins to flower and open to the present moment. It is in that present moment that the waking consciousness is able to relax and allow the deeper portions of the self to speak, not in words but in crystallizations and radiations of articulated energy. The waking consciousness is to the fuller consciousness of a self-realized entity as black and white is to color. The everyday life can be lived in grayscale, and there's always the temptation to remain on the surface and enjoy the grayscale, for it is comfortable. The life that is lived on the surface can be far more easily controlled than the life of one who wishes to plunge deep into the treasured troves of his own being and open the self up to the book of wisdom that is hidden within those stores that are so carefully tucked away below the waterline, below the waking consciousness. It can be a very painful thing to open oneself to the vivid colors of unknowing. The intellect can batter itself against the unknowing, ceaselessly attempting to make sense of infinity and eternity. Yet no matter how keen the intellect attempting to order the mysterious and paradoxical self is attempting to harness a whirlwind or lasso a Mustang running free. The best thing that you can do is to launch yourself fearlessly onto the back of whatever Mustang that you find as you explore the treasures within the hold of your ship, and let it go where it will. Let it take you to the colors and to the textures and the feelings of which you know not, so that you may experience yourself more and more deeply, more and more keenly, less and less articulately. It is as though that ship that is you as an entity must move through underground passages where there is no light, where you cannot navigate with anything but your intuition and your rock-solid knowledge of who you are. And here we come again into the paradox of unknowing and knowing, for even though you cannot, in your waking consciousness, experience or know who you are in the entirety of yourself, at the same time, you're not only capable but are asked by life itself to gather your feet under you and declare yourself in positive and clarion terms. Those who are wise relate themselves to the infinite creator of which they are a part, and then describe themselves in terms of the deepest portion of self which they have been able to plumb. Thusly, this instrument says that she is a servant of the one infinite creator, a child of love, one who wishes with all of her heart to serve and to follow her beloved. These are vague, murky terms that do not limit the self or classify the self in linear ways. This kind of expression of selfhood is more about attempting to describe the heart of the self in ways that have more to do with feelings than with objects, that have more to do with faith and will than with a career, a marriage, or any of those ways in which the waking consciousness identifies itself. We do not tell you what portion of your whole self that you are able to realize within incarnation, because the possibilities are endless. You can realize almost nothing about yourself, or as you seek and seek again, you can come to encompass and contain an awareness that has no words but has many feelings about the self, that moves quite deeply into the whole self that lies beneath the waking consciousness. What part of this could be called the entity? Indeed, the very word entity means the whole self, the entire self. Yet, you as awakened consciousness are also an entity. Therefore, we would define the entity that you are by saying whatever of the whole self that you are able to realize within incarnation is the functional entity within that incarnation. This is distinct from the whole self, which we sometimes call the soul stream. As you have built up intelligence and worked on the balances within yourself, through many, many incarnations, you have amassed a very wide and deep stream of self. You could not possibly contain that within one incarnated being, so our answer must be unique to each entity, and not only to each entity, but also to an entity at different times within an incarnation where he may have been able to gain access to a larger portion of the unknown but deeply felt self. When your race was young upon the earth, you had few ways to understand the self or to place the self within the world in which you lived. As you have built up your culture, you have gained many, many more ways of looking at the journey from birth to death that is your incarnation. Just as many ways as you have experienced yourself, so are the number of ways in which you have yet to experience yourself. Therefore, you may look upon every day of your incarnation as an adventure. Who knows what shall bring you face to face with a portion of yourself whom you have not met before? You may be delighted to meet this new portion of yourself. You may be horrified or in any response in between. However, an explorer builds intelligence from all that he sees, and to that explorer, everything is interesting. To an explorer, there is no concept of success or failure. There is only the concept of that which may be found today, and so the explorer bends his every tool and his every iota of consciousness to the task of observing accurately and perceiving clearly that which lies before him. Those things that help an entity to be more fully self-realized are those disciplines which open the door to the gateway of intelligent infinity. The key to that door is silence. We encourage the regular practice of silence of self, as the one known as G has said. The counting of the breaths, moving back to the breath, allowing the self to be untended. This is a grounding and a seating mechanism that strengthens the essential self and enlarges its ability to bear self-awareness at deeper and deeper levels. Question. I have a question from P from the United Kingdom. She says that it appears that the internet is a tool of sharing information. Cyber-based or non-physical resources are evolving rapidly and gaining momentum and acceleration in their evolution, especially since the turn of the century. Some people theorize that the internet will become a conscious entity who will learn from its third-density creators and become something unfathomable to us. There appear to be correlations in the evolution of the internet and the emergence of fourth density upon this planet. However, fourth density, as I understand it, is about awakening of Christ consciousness between people, which does not require technical expertise or machines. Is there a correlation between the evolution of the internet on the planet and the emergence of the social memory complex? How does this affect the people who have no access to advanced technology such as computers, but are evolving along the spiritual path? We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my brother. May we say to the one known as P that there is a correlation between the internet and its endless sources of human knowledge and the fourth density consciousness, but it is tangential. Let us explain. To an observer such as the one known as P, the faculties of the World Wide Web feel like fourth density consciousness, and that there is an interlocking awareness of far more things than can be known by one person. It is a kind of social memory. It is an intriguing concept that this large database might organize itself into a living entity, yet this is not the nature of the database. The organizing faculties are not there to articulate this mass of knowledge into that which is self-aware. The social memory complex of fourth density grows from the beginnings which are shared by the internet and the consciousness of all those within a fourth density environment, that is, the shared database of awareness and knowledge. Yet, whereas there is no polarity to an internet database, there is a unified, harmonized polarity to the shared knowledge of a society of seeking souls. Whereas a database cannot access itself, the social memory complex database, if you will, is accessed by all those within that society. You, as a third density society upon planet Earth, having reached nearly the end of third density, exist now as a social complex. You are fully aware of your global population and the databases and artifacts of that social consciousness, yet you do not have shared memory. You have not yet come together and developed a vector for your desire and your seeking as a people. There are The trembling and accelerating glimpses that each of you has of how it would feel to be truly one with those of your culture, so that you could collaborate together and create the world of your dreams, the world of your visions. Yet the veil is heavy, and it is difficult to find visionary people that create a critical mass of inspiration and direction. Indeed, this is why your recent election of the one known as Barack has been such a signal event to many who sense that this entity may well have the capacity as a leader to inspire positive change throughout the consciousness of the whole society. This is the direction within which each who seeks to graduate into fourth density is moving. Yet third density is not fourth density. It is good to move towards that paradigm of shared vision and unconditional love. It is a worthy beau guest to attempt to be part of that critical mass of positive thought that brings all of the planet to a successful graduation into fourth density positive. It is a worthwhile dream. It is a worthwhile effort. And we wish you the joy of being that knight who wears the armor of light and moves toward the sun of unconditional love and compassion. As to the plight of those with no access to computers because they have lived their entire lives as indigenous people, we may assure the one known as P that these entities are far more close to graduation into fourth density positive, for the most part, than those who must bear the burden of civilization and the endless ramifications of human knowledge. There is more truth, knowledge, and learning in one who knows the moons, the suns, the stars, the animals, the planets, the ocean, and the wind than there is in all the books in all the libraries of the world. And from a different channeling in 1996, they ask, "We would like information on the concepts of being in a rut or accomplished ritualized behavior for a specific purpose, and expanding our horizons and learning new things. Our own subconscious, the high priestess, seems to be the means by which we are led into new directions. Male and female relationships seem to be characterized by the female being more willing to learn new things, whereas the male is happy to be in a rut. So what we would like to know is the strengths and weaknesses of ritualized activity in expanding our horizons. We are those of Quo. This day you ask us concerning the achieving of balance, that balance of yin and yang, of reaching and waiting, of being bold and being quiet, of being fond of the usual as opposed to being fond of the novel. May we say that there is no one correct balance that persons should aim towards achieving, for each spirit has its own stored harvest of previous distortions, which means that each energy center, each line of, shall we say, electrical body impulse, is wired or arranged in a pattern unlike any other. So truly, that which is balance for one entity at a time. Each entity shall have its own strengths and its own weaknesses. However, there are some general principles which a seeker may attempt to follow in seeking that point of balance that signifies a level of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual comfort, that feeling of being comfortable within one's own skin and pleased with one's own company. If you are an entity which enjoys itself, you have achieved an enviable state of balance. It is the work of much compassion and hard-won wisdom to fall in love with the self, to be a support to that self in all of its uniqueness, with all of the quirks that signal and trumpet the imperfection of self. Each entity is uniquely distorted, and each would celebrate and enjoy those distortions while keeping the weather eye out to find those quirks, whose laughter is not kind, and to work with those portions of energy until the same stimulus triggers not a different response in terms of emotion, but rather a sense of compassion, which embraces and accepts that which is seen as distortion. The entity in balance is one which has achieved a state wherein judgment of others or of self has accuracy tempered with gentle kindness. One of the ways in which entities within third and fourth densities tend to gauge balance is by placing one set of, this entity does not have the appropriate word, she would say symptoms, but we speak of ways of thinking and ways of reacting that should be given to the female and the opposite given to the male principle. In fact, although it is so that the second density physical vehicle that carries men's and women's consciousness about in those densities have distinct sex-related patterns of behavior, it is emphatically not so that the infinite and eternal spirit that is the true self is bounded by or even very conscious of these instinctual behaviors. Gazing upon the young of your species, it is fairly easy to see that the male and the female children tend to play differently regardless of the toys which they are given. Each within this circle is aware of lifelong patterns of behavior which have been taught by those of good character and strong morality throughout their childhoods, so that the adult seeker not only has the built-in biases of the biological body, which it has for the space of this incarnation, but it also has a very thorough and often crippling grounding of what it means to be a biological male or female. Even taking these two sets of distortions into consideration, we may note that it is certainly not true that all entities respond in the same way to the various conditioning experiences of their lives. There is then no fixed limitation as to how a spiritual seeker must express its own being. However, the choice of sex, as well as other major choices concerning the incarnative period, were made by each seeker before incarnation, with an eye towards setting up an appropriate and fertile learning situation for the incarnation. This is especially true as the great cycle of evolution rolls around to a whole new and beckoning density, a time of harvest, transformation, and what this instrument would call resurrection. As this scenario unfolds, sensitive entities such as yourselves are more and more eager to find and to be the best they can be, the most balanced, the most alert, the most aware that they are personally able to be. There's a great hunger for that feeling of poise, that comfort of self that is able to view, to respond, and to be without the agony of self-recrimination and self-doubt. For those who are of the biological female in body, it may be said in general that the lessons which have been chosen are likely to deal with increasing the ability of the self to accept, to nurture, to forgive, and to understand the self and other selves. For those who are born in the body of a male, the lessons in love frequently revolve about being one who can fulfill responsibilities and duties without recrimination or ill-feeling. The simple differences are deep, and we hope that each one can see that one cannot take the differing lessons of males and females too far without losing sight of those things which are deeper, wider, and broader than the entire spectrum of sexual differences. However, if you are female, often the quiet of meditation shall bring you new ways to accept nurturing of a passing kind, and for men the same offers the burden of accepting in an active way. In other words, the female principle flames brilliantly with dreams of many colors, and it is the work of a lifetime to find roots for all the wings of imagination. For a man, it is the work of a lifetime to allow imagination to become powerful. Certainly the most efficient way for spiritual seekers to work upon themselves is to be in relationship, especially the primary mated relationship. This is a great advantage for those who are aware of the process of spiritual evolution to accept, in a conscious way, the burden of communication, so that differing viewpoints about commonly witnessed catalyst can be shared without judgment and with mutual respect. It is also valuable to have any relationship regardless of sex, in which there is open and clear communication, for each entity has within the self a unique balance of yin and yang, the male and female, if you will, within the self regardless of the biological sex of the entity. We look upon the attempts of each of you to make sense of the lessons of the incarnation, and we see within each a persistent lack of charity in dealing with the self. Often this lack of charity is projected outward, and it is felt by the self that is judgment upon others. However, the other selves are as mirrors to the self, and whether an irritable point has caught the aggravated eye of self from one's own behavior or another's, the message given to the deep mind is a judgment against the self. It is so easy, my friends, to have judgment, and so very difficult to refrain from that judgment, which does not stop at being accurate and describing, but rather moves on to evaluating the morality, ethics, or beauty of a situation. It is well for all beings to attempt to gaze upon the world with sense wide open, attempting ever more an efficient prioritizing of incoming catalyst. This is a key way of working upon the balance of the self. Each hour offers much to see and sense, and it can be arranged within the mind in many, many ways, several of them perhaps equally valid. In working upon one's balance, one is seeking to find the point within the self where there is poise, comfort, and calm within, so that the seeker may be ready to take in more rather than being swamped with what has already been taken in. Now let us look at the question of the male and female within the self. Again, we do not feel that there is any one way which is the correct balance for all entities. Indeed, there is a complete 360 degrees of possible balance for any seeker, male or female, in terms of the kind of energies and combinations of energies that run the electricity of the personality, that work those emotional bodies, that express self in the more finely tuned inner densities of light. For each entity's existence is at the same time that it is upon the earth world, also existing, learning, working, and evaluating on other unconscious inner levels. So much of what you actually do within an incarnative experience is completely unknown to the entity within incarnation. You, in your conscious state, sense dimly the movements of forces that are within you, and yet we say that deep within you lie the energies that created all there is. So perhaps to sum up, we encourage each to discover the self new each day, to find those areas which seem to be blocked or overeager or in some way out of balance, and to attempt to find time for silence and listening and reflection, time in which to open the self to that possibility of a better configuration of energies. It is a small thing to the conscious mind to pray, as this instrument does, "Lord, teach me thy ways." This sentiment can be said in many other phrases. However, that simple desire to know the better way has much more efficacy than the attempt to know precisely what to do next upon improving the self. The true work of spiritual evolution is done below the surface of consciousness. So you as a conscious being are working with your personality, working with your balance, working to aid your own evolution. When you choose to disengage the machinery of mind from ephemeral business of the passing hour to the point where you can become aware of the nature of the creation and of the self, when you can know that all is love, at the same time you are expressing distorted views, you have indeed become wise. I am Quo, and as we have exhausted the queries, we would take this opportunity to thank each of those offering queries and each present for inviting us to join your circle of seeking on this afternoon. We are most honored to do so and feel a great joy of walking with you upon your journeys. We feel a great affinity for seekers such as are gathered here this afternoon, for the desire that is evident to know the nature of your paths and the desire to be of service as you travel them are most inspiring for us to observe, for we know that the paths that each of you travels during an incarnation in this illusion is a path that is filled with mystery, is a path that is filled with difficulty, and is a path that has much confusion, for most of the qualities of the one Creator that we all seek have been covered quite carefully by the nature of your illusion, so that those lessons and services that you're able to discern are far, far more valuable than would be lessons and services within an illusion that were less heavy, less dense, and less filled with mystery. Your challenges are great, yet we see that your desire is greater, and we commend each of you for your stout-heartedness, your good will, and your cheer upon this difficult journey. At this time, we shall take our leave of this instrument and this group. We are known to you as those of Quo, and we leave each of you, as always, in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Adonai, my friends. Adonai. Here we get a very interesting discussion of the subconscious mind and a discussion of what happens as we move on from this incarnation and how we've gathered up different incarnations, how it sort of colors the choices that we make and the things that we do. We get a better understanding of how fourth density works. So it's always wonderful in the way that Quo words things. There's some great writing that's involved here and some beautiful understandings of the body and the mind and how they interact. The unconscious and subconscious mind does have a feminine aspect, which they addressed. But to me, it is a sort of loving relationship that you're having. It's a dance. You're in a relationship with your subconscious mind. It is female in that regard. And you are wooing your subconscious mind. They explain that the subconscious can sometimes be hard to get to, can play coy, can play hard to get. So we learn here this relationship, it has a sort of relational element. The conscious and the subconscious is a relationship that you have, and that's interesting. The implication here also in these channelings is that a lot of what we have experiencing in this incarnation is in the subconscious, and we're barely aware of a lot of it. And it inspires me to meditate, to go into those moments of stillness and silence, to learn more about my subconscious, to explore this aspect of my subconscious. We have an understanding of the personality, this personality shell that we acquire when we go into this incarnation. We may think this is who we are. I'm a writer. I'm an athlete. I'm all these things that I define as my personality. These are just temporary things that we've taken upon ourselves as we go through this particular illusion to learn certain lessons. But it is not who you are. As you sit there and you say, oh, I am a football player, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm an artist, whatever it is, the way you've defined yourself in this moment is not who you truly are. They're just elements that you've given to yourself, many of them, as indicated in this material, pre-incarnatively, meaning that you chose to be a man or woman. You chose to be in a good or bad situation. And a lot of the things that you chose were important to the things you wanted to learn. If there's anything in particular from these channelings that inspired you or that you really were interested in, I'd love to know. And if there's any particular topics you want me to research that perhaps Quo has attempted to answer, I'd be happy to look into it. In any case, you can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. I'm sending love and light to everyone that's listening, to everyone on this planet, hoping you feel it, hoping you can raise the consciousness of this planet and the vibration of it every day in every way, and we need you to do it. Welcome to The Reality Revolution.